Warning, the following content may be disturbing for some audiences. Viewer discretion is advised. Hope you enjoy! Let's begin.
This documentary is based on the questions asked after reading the novel The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien. This story is a historical fiction novel based on the true experiences of Tim O'Brien himself during the Vietnam War. This novel discusses the great devastation of war to reach out to an audience that does not know what the real cost of warfare is. Today we will be discussing the effects of the war on Vietnamese culture. So to begin with the Vietnamese culture, fashion is a large part of expressing their culture. And before the war, the Vietnamese fashion consisted of layering many fine fabrics that would soon change when the war began. Originally, the staple piece of Vietnamese fashion is the áo dài, translated to long shirt in English, and it was worn regularly but also on special occasions. The áo dài was made in the 1930s and has been a tradition ever since. It is usually made of gorgeous Vietnamese silk. However, when the war began, the rationing of materials used in garment production during the war introduced a new simplicity in women's clothing. Hemlines rose and decorative elements disappeared, creating the emergence of classic style. In order to supply the war effort, fabric was rationed, defeating the habit of layering and the fabric's quality. Thousands were upset with this matter, as fashion was an important piece of expressing Vietnamese culture, leading to many protests in major cities. These protests grew larger as the war progressed, associating the anti-mainstream fashion with the anti-war movement. A lawyer from California that had moved to Vietnam after the war even said, "It's like the U.S. going from the 1930s to the 1980s in 10 years. Moving on to how the Vietnam War changed the landscaping that would affect the lands forever. Before the war, Vietnam was covered with vast lands full of animals and forests. However, the Vietnam War greatly changed the ecosystem. Vietnam was exposed to water on two sides, the western border fixed on Cambodia and Laos. That led to the infiltration of the U.S. forces, leading to the mass destruction of the geography in Vietnam. Half of South Vietnam's entire forested land was damaged by bombs, bulldozers, and chemical weapons. The U.S. military's defoliation program aimed to strip the forests of life, reducing the cover for the NLF, particularly along the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Around 72 million liters of herbicide were dumped across South Vietnam, including 42 million liters of Agent Orange. This spraying represented around a seventh of South Vietnam's total land area. The first defoliation flights took place on 28th of November 1961. For years following the spraying, only uncultivable plants would grow in extensive white zones. In this kind of ecological war, the atmosphere becomes the medium of terror. Most effects of the Vietnam War on the environment have proved irreversible. Many species of animals and vegetation were greatly reduced and in some cases became extinct. In these situations, little can be done to amend the problems that the war created for the ecology of Vietnam. The war not only had extensive effect upon the ecosystem, but the children that were born between Vietnamese and American parents.
There was one big change to Vietnamese culture that Vietnam and America are still dealing with. They are the children born of war, or CBOWs. These children are fathered by foreign soldiers and born to local mothers during times of war. In this case, they are the children of American GI soldiers and Vietnamese women, referred to as Amera-Asian. Sabine Lee and Susan Andrea Bartels have found that CBOWs were exposed to significant childhood adversities and often suffered from stigmatization, and discrimination. A U.S.-based survey found that 71% of Amera-Asians interviewed reported experiences of discrimination in Vietnam, including difficulty in accessing schooling, negative attitudes by teachers, grade discrimination, and persistent offensive teasing by peers. Also, it was found that a majority of the Amera-Asian participants in Vietnam were either uneducated or undereducated, and these low literacy skills added challenges to these interviews. When As demonstrated in this clip, women who had been with these GI soldiers begged for passage and protection for their children. They feared punishment from the Viet Cong for having children with the enemy. Amerasians were beaten with sticks by other children and sneered at by adults for being the children of the enemy.
Take me with you, take my children. I will never take my children. I'm a man left already. I have enough to lose. Take my children. There is no one to fight here. They have left us behind here. I must get in there, listen anyone. Please tell my husband, look, I have his gun. Out of my way, if that's all that you've got. If I appear when they come, I'll be shot.
Let me go, Sean, I can't leave her. Why in the world should I be saved instead of her?
They'll kill who they find here. Tell the evils behind here.
It's not you, it's war that's cruel. And if some dreams get smashed, perhaps it's best they were.
There is no one to find here. They have left us behind here.
Wake up, my friend, your mercy trip.
The United States began to receive backlash for leaving these children behind. Congress created Operation Baby Lift in April 1975, where they evacuated the children from Vietnam to America, Canada, and Europe. This was followed by the Orderly Departure Program of 1979 and the Amerasian Immigration Act of 1982, which allowed for 6,000 Amerasians and 11,000 of their relatives to immigrate to the U.S. There are still an estimated 400 to 500 Amerasians in Vietnam today. The only way the remaining Amerasians are able to find their fathers are by contacting them over the internet and begging them to complete a DNA test. Brian Hewitt is a working-class Danish furniture painter who stumbled upon war orphans that were mainly Amerasians. They cared for him in his time of need, and ever since he has become devoted to tracking down veterans who left kids behind. This ties back into the ending of the musical Miss Saigon. Kim finally gets in contact with Chris. He returns to Vietnam to meet his son with his new wife. Chris decides that he's going to pay for Kim and her son to have a better life in Vietnam. Kim knows that the only way for her son to have a better life is in America. The musical ends with her committing suicide, which forces Chris to take their son to America. The Vietnam War changed Vietnamese culture with the birth of the Amerasians and the challenges that both countries would have to face because of people's lack of care towards these children born during the war.
And this concludes our documentary upon the change of the Vietnamese culture and landscape and the effects of the Vietnam War. Thank you for watching.